Welcome to Lose Yourself to Films. This is Road to the Odyssey, a series where I'll be revisiting Christopher Nolan's films from the very beginning, looking for the ideas, themes, and pieces of Nolan DNA that would eventually define his career and ultimately lead us to the Odyssey. Every master of their craft starts somewhere, and Christopher Nolan is no exception. Let's begin. Insomnia. Released in 2002, Insomnia stars Al Pacino, Robin Williams, Hilary Swank, and Martin Donovan. The film was directed by Christopher Nolan, and the screenplay was written by Hilary Seitz, based on the 1977 Norwegian film of the same name. The film follows veteran LAPD detective Will Dormer, who travels to a small town in Alaska to investigate the murder of a 17-year-old girl. But after a tragic accident during the investigation, Dormer finds himself caught in a dangerous psychological game with the very man he's trying to catch. Although Christopher Nolan didn't write Insomnia, he was inspired by the original film to want to direct it. And after revisiting it, it's not hard to see why. Many of the themes we've been tracking throughout the series are still here. So let's dive into a few of them and look at some examples. Nolan DNA. Obsession and moral ambiguity. Although Christopher Nolan didn't write Insomnia, it's easy to see why the story appealed to him. Like following in Memento, the film centers around a character whose obsession slowly begins to consume him. At first, Will Dormer is obsessed with solving the murder case. But during one of the film's most memorable scenes, while pursuing the killer through the fog, Dormer accidentally shoots and kills his own partner, Hap Eckhart. Instead of admitting what happened, he decides to cover it up. And from that moment on, his obsession changes. He's no longer just hunting a killer, he's trying to hide the truth while convincing himself he's still doing the right thing. The only person who witnessed the shooting was the killer himself, setting up one of the film's most compelling cat and mouse games as each man now holds something over the other. It's another example of a morally complicated protagonist, something we've already seen in Following and Memento, and a type of character Nolan would continue returning to throughout his career. Another reoccurring theme that clearly resonated with Nolan is identity and perception. As Dormer goes longer without sleep, his grip on reality begins to unravel. His memories become unreliable, his judgment begins to slip, and the audience begins questioning what can and can't be trusted. As Dormer's guilt slowly consumes him, the film asks us to watch a respected detective lose sight of the person he believes himself to be. It's just another example of a story exploring identity through a character's internal struggle, rather than simply asking who they are. Time and environment. When it comes to time, Insomnia takes a very different approach than Memento. Instead of manipulating the timeline, the film uses its environment to manipulate our experience of time. Set during the endless daylight of an Alaskan summer, Will Dormer's inability to sleep becomes one of the driving forces behind the story. As the day begins to blur together, so does his memories, his judgment, and his perception of reality. Time doesn't become fractured, it becomes relentless. Rather than using time as a puzzle, Insomnia uses it as a psychological pressure. It's another fascinating example of an idea that would continue appearing throughout Nolan's career, even if this time he wasn't the one who wrote the screenplay. So can a Christopher Nolan film still feel like a Christopher Nolan film if he didn't write it? I think the answer is yes. While Nolan may not have written Insomnia, it's easy to see why the story spoke to him. The obsession, the morally complicated protagonist, the question of identity and perception, and even the way time itself shapes the audience's experience, they're all ideas we've already started discovering throughout this series. So while Insomnia may be the only film Christopher Nolan directed without writing, it still feels unmistakably like a Christopher Nolan film. Next up on the road to the Odyssey, the Dark Knight trilogy. Christopher Nolan's next chapter would change not only his career but superhero movies forever. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe as we continue exploring Christopher Nolan's journey from independent filmmaker to one of the cinema's most influential directors. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next stop of the road to the Odyssey.